What's up guys, Young Stupid Gamer here, and in this video we're going to be talking about who the best hero in Castle Clash is. And the reason I'm doing a video on this is usually every single time I live stream I get the question, who's your favorite hero, or who's the best hero in Castle Clash, and I see all around people asking other people who their favorite hero is, or what hero to use for this situation, or just overall who the best hero is in Castle Clash. And that's what this video is going to be going over. Now, of course, if you disagree with anything that I say in this video, everything that I say is for preference, but a lot of what I say, a lot of people agree upon, and it's pretty much what's most commonly known as the best heroes, and what most people would agree on. And I think that the majority of good players in Castle Clash would agree with me on most of my opinions, so let's go ahead and just start with it. Now, there's two different answers that you guys might have been looking for. One, the short answer, just one hero, done and done, or two, me actually going in depth of each hero and where they're good at, and in this video I'm going to be doing both. So first off, the very short answer, the best hero in Castle Clash, Pumpkin Duke. And the reason that I choose Pumpkin Duke is in the majority of game modes you do need a Pumpkin Duke, although it's debatable in certain game modes where other people have completed it without Pumpkin Duke. It really is necessary to have Pumpkin Duke in many modes, such as Fury Monster, Dungeons, Guild Boss, and the most important game modes where you need Pumpkin Duke are game modes that are going to help you progress overall in the game a lot faster, such as Dungeons, being able to sweep your heroes up from Dungeons, and things like Fury Monsters. You need Pumpkin Duke to progress really far in Fury Monsters, and being able to progress really far in Fury Monsters will in turn help you progress your account as a whole. Now, other game modes that you can use Pumpkin Duke, you can pretty much use him in every game mode, and he's pretty much necessary in most game modes, like I already went over: Fury Monsters, Dungeons, Hero Trials, Storm Mesa, Lava, Wretched Gorge, the new Infernal Summit, Lost Realm, and of course all these game modes that I'm saying you can get to a certain extent in the game mode without Pumpkin Duke, but overall Pumpkin Duke really is the biggest must-have hero in the game, and he's overall the best hero. Now, yes, he's not the best 1v1 hero or the best Lost Battlefield hero, things like that, but that's very situational, and overall Pumpkin Duke is the #1 hero that every account needs, slashes what every account should want. So that is the short answer, even though it probably didn't seem that short. Now we're going to go over each individual hero, how much of a must-have they are, and where they're good at. So let's go ahead. And Paladin, he's good for like a first legend, but you really should never use him in any game modes, and he's really any other legend would pretty much be better than the Paladin in pretty much every game mode. Now, I know some people probably argue with me about how him Devo 10 out of 10 is insane, but so is any other hero Devo 10 out of 10. Next up, we got Ninja. Again, just one of those older, outdated heroes that you don't really use too much anymore. But again, it's just pretty much for a starter account, a first legend. But other than that, he really gets outranked by pretty much any legend in most game modes. But again, if you're just starting out and watching this video, he's good for arena, but again, if you're just starting out, you probably shouldn't even do arena. But other than that, he has very low health, he can't survive long, but he can do a lot of damage. So against things like bosses, when you need the extra damage, I guess he's good there, but overall pretty much put to the side hero that you don't really use. Next up, Succubus is pretty much the same thing, just good for that really heavy damage, such as against bosses where you just need that insane heavy damage. You use Succubus, but Succubus really isn't a high DPS hero, more as her proc just does a ton of damage. Next up, Champion is a little bit more valuable, I'd say, than the other legends that I already mentioned, but he's good for things like where you need the stun, like Guild Boss. You could definitely use him for Guild Boss, getting them honor badges from Guild Boss, and other games where you need stun, and he's an okay first Fury Monster hero, but other than that, you don't really use Champion. Next up, we got Druid, which is way more of a necessity than any other legend I mentioned besides Pumpkin Duke, where Druid, you're gonna use Druid in most places until you get a better healer like Golem, Druid is definitely going to be a necessity because of Druid's heal. You're going to be using Druid in Kirby monsters, dungeons. You're going to be using Druid pretty much everywhere. You'll use Pumpkin, you'll use Druid in most game modes as your main healer until you get Gorm. So Druid is definitely high up on the must-have list, and also the damage buff is great for in-game bosses and other places where you need the damage buff, but all around a great hero to use as a healer. Anywhere you need a healer, you're going to use Druid. And the places that you need healers is pretty much, you know, dungeons, hero monsters, and other lengthy game modes. Not like Lost Battlefield where it's just a one battle thing, but more as where it's a stretch out thing like hero monsters, dungeons, Storm Mesa, things like that. Next up we got Thunder God, which is a useful hero, yes, must have, not so much. He's a stunner, you can use it against bosses for the stun, and he's also a very, very decent first legend to add to your first team. He's definitely a great legend for that because he does decent damage, he has decent health, and he's definitely good competitively in most game modes up to a certain point. Let's say anywhere below 50,000 might you can get good usage out of Thunder God. Anything after that you'll probably be able to replace him with better legends, but he is a very, very decent legend. If you're just starting out, you should definitely save up your shards and buy yourself a Thunder God, but I believe now just for like the daily sign-in in the first 7-day starter pack they have now, you get a free Thunder God, and you should definitely use him. Next up we have Grizzly Reaper, which Grizzly Reaper is more of a situational hero, but I still use him on my account in some situations, and he can definitely be used in many situations. But he's definitely not he's definitely not a hero that you want on your first team. If you have only 6 heroes or 5 heroes, whatever the case, and you're only using those 5 heroes, Grizzly Reaper you don't really want it to be one of them unless you don't have any other legends to replace him with. He's good for things like sniping, like in Guild Wars, or where you really need a DPS to a bunch of different targets like in Lava Isle or Storm Mesa. But other than that, he's not really a hero monster hero, but I've seen him be really decent in dungeons where he does damage to a bunch of different heroes in dungeons. So I'd say use him in things like dungeons. And first off, before I go any further, if you guys just have any questions that you just need answered really quick, you can just go in the comment section and ask the question. I can answer you very quickly. If you just have a question about a certain hero, I can just answer you in the comment section very quick and easy. But in this video, I'm going to be going over every single legend. So, Lanore, Lanore can be useful, but another one of those heroes that you don't really want on your first team, don't really want to be part of your main 6. Can be good in PvP modes because of its proc, where it pretty much can just wipe out a team as soon as it procs because it deflects damage, and it can also be used as a pretty good tank, but not really a hero monster hero, not really a dungeon hero, not really a necessity hero. Next up we have a Morb, more of a necessity hero. Definitely going to use it for hero monsters. If you don't have Vlad, Morb is definitely a hero monster hero. Can also be good for things like Storm Mesa, and can also be good for things like dungeons because it stuns and does plenty of AoE damage around him. So he's definitely a great hero to be part of your main 6. Especially if you're under 50,000 might. After 50,000 might, of course, you probably have one of the newer OP heroes that can replace a Morb. But we're going over all legends, and in the description, I think I'm gonna put I'm just gonna rank them all legends. I'm gonna put in a ranked list of who you use first, if that makes any sense. Siren, a very situational hero that you're only going to use in a few game modes, probably only 1 or 2, but besides that, Siren is very useless, I guess I could say. Not a hero monster hero, not really a dungeon hero, although some people have used Siren in dungeons. Really not a dungeon hero, not really a Storm Mesa hero. The only place I've really seen Siren be useful is against bosses, like in-game bosses like Archdemon. But besides that, I'd say you don't really want to use Siren. Next up we have Phantom King, more useful than Siren, but still not one of the most useful heroes. Really good for Guild War defense, also good for Storm Mesa, Lava Isle 3, good where you need extra scatter. Can be used in Hero Monster 3, but I really wouldn't use it in Hero Monster 1 and 2. And when I say 1 and 2, I'm going to just show you, I mean Challenge 1, Challenge 2. This is where you're not going to use Phantom King. Once you get to Challenge 3, you can actually make good use out of Phantom King as a hero monster hero. So let's go and get back to the heroes. Okay guys, so moving on to Spirit Mage. Spirit Mage is really simple. $250 to get Spirit Mage, and once you get Spirit Mage, you're not going to use Spirit Mage anywhere except for dungeons. Spirit Mage is pretty much just a dungeon hero, and not really useful anywhere else except for in dungeons. Moving on to Pumpkin Duke. We already went over Pumpkin Duke. Minotaur, you have to spend like $750 I think it is to get a Minotaur. And once you get a Minotaur, you probably have most of the other heroes that you'll use. So pretty much anywhere that you're going to use Minotaur will only be in dungeons, just like Spirit Mage. The only other place that you could possibly get good usage out of Minotaur besides dungeons would be Guild Wars, but that's only if you have like a 10 of 10, 8 of 8 War God, Devo, Insane Minotaur, which you probably not in that situation if you're watching this video, but you still could be. But yeah, the only place you're going to use Minotaur is dungeons and Guild Wars if yours is very, very high level. Moving on to Snowzilla, the only place you're going to use Snowzilla is in a DPS situation where you need just a lot of DPS, such as Guild Boss or Archdemon, just situations where you need a ton of DPS, and you can already survive without Snowzilla, but Snowzilla can just add DPS if you don't have someone like Tamer or Trixie Treat. Snowzilla definitely can add more DPS. Moving on to Cupid. Cupid is probably in the top 5, top 10 must-haves, because Cupid not only does a great energy buff, but also a great damage buff. And where you're going to use Cupid if you get Cupid, especially if you don't have Valentina, is any guild boss mode. You're going to use it in Harpy monsters, you're going to use it in dungeons, hero trials, you're going to use it in pretty much any situation you're going to use Pumpkin Duke, because you definitely need that extra energy and extra damage, and it helps your Pumpkin Duke stay stacked. So it's sort of like an attachment, you could think of it that way, to Pumpkin Duke to make your Pumpkin Duke even more OP and even better, even more situational, and just helps Cupid, or Cupid will just, you pretty much use Cupid in every situation. Unless you have Valentina, you'll use Valentina instead of Cupid in some situations, but you'll really use Cupid in things like hero monsters, dungeons, guild wars, especially guild wars, and you can also use it in places like Storm Mace. So moving on to Montanica. I don't have Montanica, and you don't really hear too much about Montanica, and it seems like Montanica is only good in places where you really need a debuff, but there's not really too many situations like that. But I'd say the only place you're going to use Montanica, if you get a Montanica, will be in places like Lost Battlefield or in Harpy monsters, because Montanica can be a really good hero monster hero with Scatter, especially in Harpy Monster 3. Once you get a challenge AA. Moving on to Aries. Aries is another very must-have hero, especially in PvP modes. Not so much must-have in modes like Harpy monsters and dungeons, although it can be pretty helpful in Harpy monsters, especially when you get Hero Monster Challenge 3. Not useful at all in dungeons, but really, really useful in every PvP mode. Arena, Lost Battlefield, Guild Wars, Fortress Feud, pretty much any game mode that you're going head-to-head against other players, you're gonna want to use Aries, because Aries just silences them, reduces energy, and is all around a great PvP hero, and he's pretty much for any PvP mode, because he's just like the game's most OP PvP hero. And moving on to Vlad. Vlad is your Harpy monster hero, but he's also can be very useful in dungeons. I used him on my account as a dungeon hero, but he's a very, very OP hero monster hero. You definitely want to have him in your top 6, especially for Harpy monsters. And if you don't have heroes like Spirit Mage or Minotaur, he'll be a very useful dungeon hero. Other than that, he can be good in PvP modes, but there's definitely other heroes that you'll use instead of him in PvP modes. Moving on to Death Knight. Death Knight pretty much doesn't have much of a purpose. Can be used in dungeons to decrease the amount of times your team gets stunned, because he immune to 1 debuff, so he can be good in dungeons. Also can be useful in a few archdemons, but besides that, Death Knight really isn't a hero that you want to level up at all. he's definitely not a useful hero. Orcs Bane is pretty much in the same boat as Death Knight. He's not too good. He can be a useful dungeon hero if you really need him as a dungeon hero, and then he can also be a Hero monster hero, I would say, but there's a lot of other heroes that I'd use in Hero monsters instead of Orcs Bane before I use Orcs Bane. So if you have no other option for certain game modes, I'd definitely use Orcs Bane, but I'd say Orcs Bane is definitely one of those heroes that you need to ask about, like in the comment section. Like Orcs Bane versus this hero, you can ask me in the comment section and I'll go ahead and answer you just real quick. Moving on to Santa Boom. Santa Boom is a huge DPS hero for game modes such as Lava Isle 3, or not Lava 3, but Lava Isle, yeah, Lava Isle 3, but Lava Isle as a whole. Storm Mesa, he can be a Hero monster hero. I used him in Hero monsters before I got to Challenge 3, so he can definitely be a Hero monster hero, but he's also a huge dungeon hero. And besides dungeon and Hero monster and team dungeon, he's really not too useful in other modes. He can do a ton of damage in PvP modes like Lost Battlefield. Other than that, I wouldn't really use him too much. Moving on to Pixie. Pixie is pretty much just for like bosses like Arctica and a Guild War hero. I'd say those are the only two situations that you really need Pixie, is against bosses and against Guild Wars. Really shouldn't be in your top 6 unless you're really going for a strong Guild War team. Moving on to Destroyer. Destroyer is honestly a waste of money if you're spending just to get Destroyer. I think it's like $1,500 you gotta spend to get Destroyer, and he's really not useful in too many game modes. I've only seen him be used on Guild War Defense and Lost Battlefield. And besides that, he's not to be used anywhere else. Moving on, Warlock is pretty much a Guild War hero. He's definitely a really strong sniper, but besides that, he's not really used too much. I can't really think of anywhere else besides maybe dungeons for that stun immunity, but besides dungeons for stun immunity, I'd only use him in PvP modes like Lost Battlefield, Guild Wars, Arena, just other PvP modes. Triar, his use is pretty much Lava, Storm Mesa, and Guild Wars. I'd say that's pretty much his use, and where you'll use him is just Guild Wars. Nowhere defensive because he doesn't revive on defense, so you're not going to use him anywhere for defense. The only place you're going to use him is for Guild Wars or for team dungeons, I would say. Harpy Queen. You're only going to use Harpy Queen if you double evolve her for like Guild War defense. You could also use her for Arena or very few PvP modes like Lost Battlefield. Definitely not Guild War often, but Guild War defense and Lost Battlefield and Arena, I'd say that's where you're going to use Harpy Queen. But besides that, she doesn't really have too many uses. Moving on to Skull Knight. Skull Knight is one of the most OP heroes in the game, where you can use him in every situation. There may be better options, but he can be used in every situation in the game. But I'd say if you have Skull Knight, where you're going to use him the most, where you should use him the most, definitely Guild Wars, Hero Monster Challenge 3. I also use him to beat Hero Monster Chief, so he can be a pretty decent Hero Monster hero, but he's definitely for PvP modes, Lost Battlefield, Arena, Guild Wars. That's where you're going to be using Skull Knight the most, but you can pretty much use him in every situation, as I do. I use him in every situation I can think of. I even use him for a tank in dungeons, I use him in Hero Monsters, I use him in Hero Trials, I use him in every situation except for Storm Mesa and Lava Isle, so he's very useful hero that any account would be lucky to have him. Moving on to Dreaddrake. Dreaddrake is a tank and a stunner, where he is very helpful in PvP modes, except for Guild War offense. He's really good for Guild War defense, very good for Lost Battlefield, very good for Arena. Not so much for Hero Monsters. Hero Trial is definitely a great Hero Trial hero, and he's also a great tank for dungeons. I think that's covered everything that he's good for. Golem is a very OP healer, which is pretty much your Druid replacement anywhere that you don't need the Druid buff. I would say you're going to use Golem in dungeons, you're going to use Golem in Hero Monsters, Hero Trials, Guild War defense, team dungeons, pretty much everywhere that you need a healer, you're going to use Golem, especially places like Guild War defense, Hero Monsters, Hero Trials, dungeons. Definitely we're going to be using Golem. Candy Cane, I can't really say that there's any use for Candy Cane unless you have 5/5 Revitalize on Candy Cane. You can't use her pretty much at all, and even if you have 5/5 Revitalize on her, she's barely useful in Arena and maybe useful in Lost Battlefield, but besides that, Candy Cane's a very useless hero. Arctica is pretty much, I would say, a totem hero, Harpy monster hero, or Lava Isle 3 hero. That's the only place you're really going to use Arctica is in defense modes like Harpy monsters and Wretched Gorge. I couldn't think of the name for a second. Harpy monsters, Wretched Gorge, and totems in Guild Wars, Lava Isle 3. I'd say that's pretty much where you're going to use Arctica. Besides that, there's not too many uses for Arctica, but very, very must-have for Lava Isle 3. Moving on to Valentina. Valentina is sort of Cupid's replacement where you don't need the damage buffs, but Valentina gives way more energy than Cupid, so it's definitely a better replacement for things like Harpy monsters, and you're definitely going to be using Valentina in things like Harpy monsters. You can use her in Guild Wars defense, but she's kind of spongy, dies pretty easy. But yeah, definitely use her in Harpy monsters, hero trials. I'd use her in dungeons. And besides that, there's not too many uses. If you guys have any more questions about any heroes I mentioned, again, just ask in the comment section below. And Beast Tamer, you're only going to use Beast Tamer pretty much in Guild Wars defense and places that you really need DPS, where you could use the extra hero. Other than that, Beast Tamer really isn't that useful. Lady Leo, I would say it really only useful unless you have, or really only useful if you have high Revitalize on her, 4/5 Revive or 5/5 Revive, and then she's only useful in like Lost Battlefield and Fortress Feud. I'd say just like those two PvP modes are the only place that she's useful. Moving on, we can Grimfiend. Grimfiend is also a very OP hero, just like Skull Knight. I've used Grimfiend in Harpy monsters, hero trials, Guild Wars offense and defense, insanely OP defensive hero. Grimfiend can be used in dungeons, although it's not too common. And Grimfiend can also be an Arctica replacement in Lava Isle 3. So pretty much where you're going to use Grimfiend. Harpy monsters if you have no better Harpy monster hero. Guild Wars offense, Guild Wars defense, and then PvP modes like Lost Battlefield and Fortress Feud. Drakax, completely useless. You're not going to use Drakax anywhere, so we can just go and move on. Medusa, it's another one of those heroes that you really want to have a high revive on her. You want to have high revive on Medusa for her to be useful, and once you have high revive, she can be used for boss modes like Archdemon, can be used Lost Battlefield and Fortress Feud, so I'd say just the few PvP modes and then guild bosses as well. Moving on, Demogorgon. Demogorgon is a very OP hero, but I'd say you can use him in a lot of different situations, but once you get, it's more of an in-game hero. Demogorgon's definitely more of an in-game hero for like Hero Monster Challenge 3, Guild Wars offense, Infernal Summit defense, PvP modes. I'd say that's pretty much where you're going to use Demogorgon because it's such a powerful sniper. Definitely going to be using it in things like Guild Wars, Lost Battlefield, things like that where you really need a heavy sniper. Pretty much like a Warlock 2.0, more useful, more damage dealing Warlock. And then Trixie Treat, you're really only going to use Trixie Treat where you need a ton of DPS, like boss modes. And besides that, I've seen people use Trixie Treat in Guild Wars offense, but I really wouldn't advise it. You're pretty much just going to use Trixie Treat against bosses like Archdemon where you really need that extra DPS. Other than that, there aren't too many uses for Trixie Treat. Moving on to Revenant. Revenant is one of those heroes that we don't really know the use for Revenant yet. The only place that people have used Revenant is Guild Wars defense, which I've seen, from what I've seen, he's really not even that good of a Guild Wars defense hero, so I really wouldn't use him on defense. So pretty much at this moment, unless you really need his doppel for the extra DPS, I wouldn't use him. He's not that useful of a hero yet. Moving on to Little Nick, our last hero that we're going to be going over. Little Nick is very, very new, so we're not sure about all the uses of Little Nick yet, or how much of a must-have he is, but from what we've seen so far, he's very, very good dungeon hero. He's like the free-to-play Minotaur, the Minotaur that you can obtain through gems. Very good for dungeons, very good for defense mode, or Guild War defense. I don't know how he is on Hero Monster defense yet, but he definitely has potential for being a Hero Monster hero. But he's definitely more of a dungeon hero and Guild War defense hero. Also seen some people using him as Guild War offense, but he's definitely one of those heroes that you really gotta do further research on, watch like more in-depth gameplay, and decide where you want to use him yourself. Again, but I don't have Little Nick, so I'm not sure, but he's definitely, from what I've seen, more of Guild War defense hero and a dungeon hero. But that's pretty much it for this list. Once again, if you guys have any questions, go to the comment section and let me know, and I'll answer them as soon as possible. But besides that, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you have not done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And I hope all of you guys had a wonderful day.